Hello, my little Luxes. Welcome back to another Luxy Charms, and I'm your host, Tressie Lux. And today, obviously, considering what the title of this video is, I am going to be talking about The Cabin in the Woods. And it's a huge reason why, because of the fact that for the FFB movie night, that was the movie that I had hosted on that evening. Now, I realize that quite a few of you here on YouTube have no idea what the hell I'm talking about when I say FFB movie night. Well, me and a group of my friends, each evening on Fridays, we'll take turns hosting a different movie and we'll give trivia facts, we'll talk about favorite scenes, maybe a favorite memory that we have from a film, or maybe it's a memorial to someone that we've loved dear to us that we've lost, and that these movies hold just a special place in our hearts because of it. Now, if any of you are Mutant fam members of The Last Drive-In, how FFB ended up getting started, because I'm an honorary member into it quite later on, when it was the Friday nights that it wasn't for The Last Drive-In with Joe, Bob, and Darcy and everything. Then all of a sudden, the FFB crew got together and started hosting their own films on Fridays. And like I said, we all kind of take turns and each one of us pick out a movie, host it, do our own thing. If it's a Friday evening and you have nothing else to do and you love movie nights, you love horror films, comedy, that kind of stuff, definitely come join us over on Twitter or on Blue Sky. And all we do is we hit play on the movie and you follow along with the hashtags FFB movie night. But enough about the FFB movie night, even though, yes, I can rant and rave about it all day and just talk about how much I love and enjoy it. It's fun, something that we do as a group of friends. But, so, The Cabin in the Woods. While I was hosting it and that, when I do hosting for my films, I do a lot of extensive research, where I will watch behind the scenes, I will take notes, I will watch interviews. I do that for my movie reviews, but that's also what I bring to the table when I do my hosting for the Friday night's movie watches. So no, this isn't going to be directly a movie review in any way or form, because let's face it, we just watched it and we did all the notes and everything about it. We talked about the trivia behind the scenes and everything. So I wanted to do something different with this one because of the fact that I feel like The Cabin in the Woods is such an underappreciated, underrated, modern horror movie that doesn't get talked about enough. And as of right now in the US, it is free to watch on Tubi. So this is the opportunity to please go watch it. So yes, I am going to start off with spoilers. Spoiler alert. Viewer discretion is advised, although I don't know if I'm going to use movie clips or not, because of the fact, well, it's Lionsgate that owns the film, and Lionsgate is very kind and very nice when it comes to copyright, when it is fair use and everything like that. You just got to give them a day or two, so we'll see. I probably will put in some short movie clips to demonstrate some of the things that I'm talking about, or I'll just use the movie stills that I used for the FFB movie night. I mean, it'd be easier because it's in a folder sitting and waiting. But like I said, I want to talk about this one because of how much I love this. And it's also interesting that the amount of people that would come in with their opinions, negative opinions, I should say, that I'm noticing a lot of times that when you're giving facts about movies or you're repeating things from interviews or the behind the scenes and that, people will come in questioning it. And it's like, in my head, I'm like, I am literally taking things straight from the horse's mouth, as the old saying goes. So when people come in with their 2 cents about stuff, it's just like, you know what? Here is a link to the behind the scenes. You go have fun with that. So I guess a little bit out of frustration, it's kind of inspired this idea because I want to go back over and talk about the behind the scenes and stuff that I talked about because of the fact that, like I said, when I do my movie reviews and that, I do the extensive research. And when it's available to you online, especially with today's technology, everything can be Googled to this point. Yes, a lot of people will say be careful about the information you'll get on IMDb or Wikipedia because anybody can type into them. But there's been a huge difference with Wikipedia for the past 20 years back, because yes, I'm a millennial. Back in the day, they would say don't use it. Nowadays, schools are saying it's actually a reliable source because of the amount of people that work there that are on top of every time somebody touches the website. Now, they might be struggling and having some issues now because I know they're looking for fundraising and that kind of stuff. So always double check your sources, and that's what I do. If there is something that is questionable and I can't find a reliable interview or anything else behind the scenes that will match the stuff that I find, I won't use it. I may bring it up in like a short or talk about it just as an interesting thing to bring up and say, this is a possibility, but it's also one of those things, yes, we could go straight to the sources themselves, go to the director or the writers and be like, hey, is this true? But the likelihood of hearing something back from them, we know how that goes sometimes. And I understand because I get overwhelmed with notifications. I can't imagine what they go through. And I will miss a lot of notifications, especially when I am on my social media breaks, because they are much needed, especially nowadays. But anyway, I'm going to go through my handy-dandy notebook because that's what I do. I write my notes in my notebook. Maybe someday I'll put it on an iPad or something. It's not like I don't have one, but whatever. I had mentioned in this film that Drew Goddard and Joss Whedon had worked together on the Buffy TV series. And because they had worked so well together and they were very quick at script writing, where they would joke about the fact that they could get together for an entire weekend and like very quickly write out scripts. So they had wanted to work together on a film. And the only thing that they knew for sure was that the idea they were focusing on was that it was surrounding the idea of it being at a cabin. So thus, the cabin in the woods was born. Now, it's impressive to note the fact that they wrote this script basically in a weekend. They wrote it within 3 days. Now, obviously, like continuing the ideas, but the core idea of the film, the core screenplay, was done in 3 days. And they make the joke about the fact that they locked themselves in a hotel room. It was a duplex hotel room where one took the upstairs, one took the downstairs, which kind of becomes ironic because of the fact that those who have watched The Cabin in the Woods, there's always that reference to the upstairs and the downstairs. Because you have the upstairs, which is the cabin part, with the young college students who are the victims of this sacrifice. Like I said spoiler alert, so if I'm revealing things that you didn't want to know, I don't know what to tell you at that point. Spoiler alert. But the downstairs was the council room, the office. Basically, the ones who controlled everything. I guess it would be more of a control room in that aspect. And they were making sure that the sacrifice was happening and that everything was progressing correctly. And it has to be 5 young people that fit the category for this sacrifice. Now, each region has a different version that they have to do, that have a different sacrifice, that are related to different gods, different fairy tales, and that kind of idea. You get little hints. The main focus that you have is the one that's happening in the US, which is the Cabin in the Woods story, and the one that's happening in Japan, because it has been announced pretty quickly that all the other regions have failed and that their sacrifices were a no-go. Now, there's little hints and things that the other regions are like vampires, King Kong, and that kind of stuff. It's that kind of references. And you have the ghost story that is happening at the school for the Japanese version. Now you get the fun part that is happening with the American US version, although technically all the filming was done in Canada because they have the most stunning, beautifully dense forests that were perfect for being these horror background of the cabin in the woods. But the beautiful part about this sacrifice that is going on in the cabin in the woods is completely related to every horror movie trope that we can think of. And the 5 main characters are revolved around that idea. Now, there is some differences on what people think that the final god actually is at the end of the film, but from the interviews that I saw, from the facts that I was finding online, is that it was supposed to be related to Kronos. Now this is where one of those funny comments ended up happening, because like I said, for the FFB movie night, we put out our facts, we kind of plug them out while doing the hashtag and everything. And some rando, have no idea who they are, have never spoken to them before, came in basically telling me that Kronos was a titan, he wasn't a god. And it's like, well, you're also right and wrong, because yes, Kronos was a titan and part of Greek mythology and everything. And thanks to today's technology, you can even do just a quick Google search and everything, and it will tell you that, yes, Kronos is a titan, but Kronos is also a god. He's one of the original Greek gods. And that's the whole idea. He is the original king of the gods. And what is also a part of that mythology is that he was so evil that his family turned against him, which included Zeus, who buried all of the evil titans, the original gods, basically in the sea and imprisoned them so that, they were trapped away. So that mythology is kind of linked in for the idea that this god that they're trying to appease is Kronos. Now, someone else had also brought up that the possibility of it being Lovecraftian and that, which is always a strong possibility. But it's the idea of Cthulhu. There would have been tentacles. This was a huge arm hand coming out of the ground. I think they hint to Cthulhu being one of the creatures in the control panel office space, whatever the hell you want to call the downstairs. We'll call it the downstairs. So, but they also call it an alien, which, I mean, I've heard references that Cthulhu had the possibility of being an alien, parallel worlds. I mean, it's the whole idea of bending dimensions and that kind of stuff. But that is the beauty about the fact when it comes to movies and that. Because yes, you can take ideas and directions from real mythology, real stories, but at the end of the day, whatever the writers, creators, whatever they say it is in the movie, that is what it is. But if they're saying it's Kronos, that's who it is. Now, it's also open for interpretation, and that's the beauty of it being a movie. Is this movie has so many references. And the fact that Drew Goddard, who is the director, also one of the writers, that he had come up with so many different ideas. I mean, Josh Whedon was along the ride with him. They came up with 60 plus different creatures, but they're all in some kind of reference to a horror movie, film, franchise, slashers, monsters, just anything that you can think of was thrown in there, which included the unicorn, which was another one of the facts that I had given because of the fact that my first interaction with this film was because of the fact that this was during the time I was going to college, I was an art student, and I was in my weaving class, of all places to be working. And one of the students was talking with her friends, and she was telling them about seeing the movie for the weekend, and she's like, oh, it was so amazing. Like, you don't understand how crazy it was at the end of the film. And one of the lines I can remember her saying was she's like, a unicorn, a fucking unicorn stabbed a guy. And I'm just sitting there working on my project and thinking in my head, I'm like, was that the same movie I saw in the trailer? Because I knew I wanted to see it, but I'm like, that seems way different than what I thought it was. And that's the beauty of this film, is it seems so deceiving, especially if you're seeing the trailer, because of the fact that they were very careful about hiding the actual intention of the film. And I mean, it's beautifully done because of that. But they liked doing that anyways. So you're kind of being tricked during the trailer. It's not giving you full disclosure, which I mean, that's what it should be. The trailer shouldn't be telling you everything. It shouldn't be telling you the whole movie, even though some of these new age ones thinks that they have to have spoilers even in the trailers, which is dumb. But anyway, they started the movie off in the downstairs, in the control room, in the offices, where they're kind of talking about how the other regions have failed in their sacrifices, but in such a way that you're just confused. And they did it on purpose to make you think you were watching the wrong film. Now, the first time I watched it, I knew better because the movie was spoiled for me. Like I said, I'm one of those lucky people that I don't get mad about movie spoils and that kind of stuff. But unfortunately, I went into the movie knowing what it was. I think it would have been so much more fun going into it having no idea. And that is one of those things where it's like, that might be one of the rare cases where it's like, ah, man, to watch this not knowing anything would have been amazing. Now, I remember somebody during the FFB movie night when we were watching it, that they were even talking about that they hated the scene towards the beginning. I want to say it's about 13 minutes in when the hawk ends up hitting the shield. They said they didn't like seeing that because it gave too much away too quick. Where it's like, for me, I'm like, oh god, no, that still would be like, what the fuck is going on? It would start off like that for me if I had no idea what was going on. And like I said, the only reason why was because I had spoiled to me. Although I'm pretty sure that part was in the trailer anyways. So you're kind of being fed little hints here and there that something's not right. And I mean, it's like that for most horror movies, anyways. So to me, it just kind of added to the mystery of, well, what the hell is going on? But I love the fact that the focus is on the idea of the horror movie tropes are what the sacrifice is. So, with your 5 main characters, you have the whore, you have the athlete or the jock, you have the fool, you have the scholar, and then you have the virgin, who is the character that can either live or die. It doesn't matter as long as they are the last one to be standing, because they have to do it in this whole element and, for the sacrifice. And if the sacrifice doesn't work, all else fails, which is the whole premises of the movie and everything, is that it's the idea which comes to the final conclusion where you have Kronos come out. So you have 2 of the main characters, Dana and Marty's character, who go through this dilemma of deciding what they're going to do. Now, granted, Marty is all for, we're just going to let everything implode on itself, where it's Dana who's going through the dilemma of, do I kill my friend and sacrifice him to save the world, or do we just let it all go? So, there are alternate endings and differences from there. This was the ending that was chosen. So, it technically, by default, is the horror movie with the largest body count, which is the entire world population. Now, the only thing that can ever compete with it is if the entire universe is wiped out. So, I mean, I guess you can be. Well, I guess you'd be winning if you wiped out the entire world again, because the world population keeps going up. Although, granted, I think last year was the first time that they actually saw it go down in population. So, Don't quote me on that, but I think that's what they said. And if you can't tell how much I love this movie, because how much I've already dragged on about this, I was just going to go through all my facts, kind of talk about them. But if I do that, I am going to be here for an hour. I mean, I guess this can be like a podcast. I mean, I feel like my movie reviews are podcast style, like, anyways. Obviously, that if you're just listening to me in the background, it's fine, it's whatever. But I enjoyed talking about this stuff to pull in and have the conversation with everybody. So if you guys know little movie facts or want to talk about how you like or dislike the movie, or even talking about your first interactions of dealing with the movie, like, was the movie spoiled for you? Because this is one of those movies you really don't want to have spoiled. So it would have been one of those things where I guess I should have thrown a shoe at that girl, but it would have been one of the few times that I would have been like, oh, I don't care about spoilers, except in that one moment where it would have been like, you know what? It would have been more awesome to get the huge reveal at the end, not knowing what was going to end up happening. And like I said, that was spoiled to me very early. But yeah, you have the whole idea that Marty's character has this really amazing thermos slash bong that actually functions as both of them, and that the prototype itself costs like $5,000. But Drew Goddard and Josh Whedon both said that during the premiere, that was highly regarded. That was a favorite item that they said they got a lot of reaction from the audience, which makes sense, and that a lot of them wanted to actually have it made for sales. But if the prototype itself was $5,000, I can't imagine trying to continue creating those, which now that most states are becoming legal, that it might have a higher probability of happening. We'll have to see. I brought up the little facts about the fact that Jules' character, that during Truth or Dare, she was dared to kiss the moose, which was actually a wolf, and that the wolf head is synthetic, nothing on it was real, it was faux fur, and that the silicone tongue, which was removable so that, you know, how many takes they had to take, they would have to clean and sterilize it each time. And it was dusted with powdered sugar, one, to make it look dusty, but two, so that it tasted better for actress Anna Hutchison, who played Jules. So I made the joke for the movie night that it was a sweet treat, because, you know, obvious reasons. I also talked about the fact that Heather Langenkamp, who is famously known as Nancy from A Nightmare on Elm Street, that her and her husband, artist David Leroy Anderson, work as a team in special effects. So it's really cool to know that our original final girl, Nancy, is now a special effects makeup artist. And her and her husband worked on The Cabin in the Woods. I almost said The Nightmare in the Woods. The Cabin in the Woods. And of course, she's got her artist name, which is Heather Anderson, which makes sense. It's her married name. But she will also still go by Heather Langenkamp. And she talks about the fact that one of her favorite creatures to make and to work with was the merman, and that the blowhole that is spewing out the blood when Hadley's character is getting killed by the merman he so much wanted to see happen in the movie, that while he's being killed by it, the creature is spewing out gallons and gallons of blood from his blowhole. But that was added in pretty last minute, and it is such a beautiful effect. And they joke about the fact that they had like 5 minutes of spewing gallons and gallons of blood, yet the last 10 seconds are what are used in the film. But such an amazing shot, and Heather absolutely loved it. And I love knowing those little behind the scenes tidbits and things where you get to see how everything is made. And the fact that Drew Goddard wanted practicals to be used for this. And thank goodness for that, because of the fact that it makes a huge difference. And my comparison can be for the fact that over the weekend I watched Howl. Now, I love Howl. it's a fun werewolf movie. But I think of the fact of what a difference it is watching a movie and seeing the CGI werewolves compared to the practical werewolves. And just anything physical is just so much better. Yes, I get the money, cost efficiency in that. It sucks that so many horror movies are relying on CGI because of money in that. And it's like, why are these movies so over budget most of the time, anyways? The bread and butter of horror is just, it's practicals. It really is. So I give a lot of credit to this movie for the fact of how much they had for practicals. And the Andersons, of course, even comment on the fact that they were in the right place at the right time, that it probably could never even happen again because they were able to get a larger space, were able to get a bigger crew, because when they realized by the end of the film how much they needed to create, and in such a short amount of time as well, that they got very lucky with being able to do that. And so incredibly glad that they were, because the monsters in this film are amazing, phenomenal, and the references to everything, and you can see just about every movie reference in some way or form. And the fact that the downstairs, the control room and offices were actually a real office building that was still active. So they could only film when it was vacant, so they were only filming at night. You have actress Maya Masser, who played one of the Buckner zombies, talks about the long process of makeup and everything, that the first day it was like an 8-hour process, where as time progressed and that it turned into a 4 to 6 hour, which is still a long time to be sitting in a makeup chair, but I think I'd rather go with the 4 hours compared to the 8, that's for damn sure. But once again, using the practicals, using the makeup, it was so much better looking than I can even think of having CGI zombies. And I don't even understand why anyone would even waste their time with CGI zombies. I mean, I guess if you have a horde of them and that kind of stuff, but it's just the makeup that was done for this was amazing. And this was also Drew Goddard's debut directing film, one of the few films that he had done. And he had even said that because this was his first, that he really wanted the practical and was pushing for it. And he had flat out said that if it hadn't been his first film, after knowing what he knows now, that he might not have done that. But obviously, it was such a huge challenge because of how many creatures they had. There's a huge difference between if you have only a few monsters compared to a plethora. And of course, they had a plethora. This was quantity and quality mixed into one. You don't get that a lot of times, especially when it comes to horror films. In fact, Joss Whedon, after they had written the screenplay and had started getting stuff going, had loved it so much he had even wanted to direct it. So Drew Goddard stuck to his guns, and, they were friends and everything. So it's easy for you to put your foot down and be like, no, this is going to be my baby. Because they say this is a love letter to horror movies, and it makes perfect sense because the whole thing is definitely referring to the tropes and, like I said, every single horror genre you can think of. And yes, even though they didn't want to use CGI, there were a few monsters that had to be CGI in. And it's because of the fact that this office space that they were using, they didn't realize how huge this space really was until they started progressing. And they had to come up with huge creatures to take up the volume so that it didn't seem like this empty space, because of the fact they wrote the lines, chaos on every corner, chaos in every room, chaos in every page, however you want to think about it. And they realized how much of a challenge that one line in a screenplay was going to be for them. So yes, they did end up using CGI. Now, there's a different element where if you're taking CGI and kind of adding it to make it better, there's a difference. Don't add CGI to make it worse, because my perfect example is The Thing, the prequel from 2011, which is ironic because it came out about the same time as this movie. they used the practicals, and the practicals were brilliant. But here, this producer, executive, I can't remember exactly which one it was, because I'm just going to think this guy's an idiot no matter what, came in and said, oh, you need to do this over with CGI because it's going to be better. And when you see the original footage with the practicals, it put it on par with The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing. So it's very disappointing to find out that it was ruined with CGI. And there's dumb decisions like that. Whereas this one, it's like if you're using elements of CGI to make it better and you're not replacing the practicals, it makes a world of difference. I love the little throwback to the fact that Marty is reading Little Nemo, and I grew up on Little Nemo. It's an old comic, but I remember the cartoon, and I remember the original Nintendo game of Little Nemo. And of course, you fight the Nightmare King, and its whole idea that Little Nemo releases the Nightmare King, and then in the game, and the TV show, and the comic, is the idea that Little Nemo and his friends have to capture all the nightmares and put them away, which it's kind of the same idea when you think of Pandora's box, but also the same idea. Like with Marty, is that he's kind of foreshadowing his own tale when he's talking about Little Nemo and the Nightmare King, because they are going to release the god from his tomb, which I don't know how much of a tomb it is, considering the fact that all it takes is these sacrifices to keep him appeased. But as soon as they don't have these sacrifices, he breaks free, so he's not really imprisoned. Whatever. We're going too much into details when it's just, this is where I need to say, even with the comments, is we're going with what was written, and that is what it is. I mean, I guess we can do theories and that kind of stuff, but And I love the fact that this film can be the idea of it's the kitchen sink of horror films. Like I said before, they came up with 60 plus different creatures and slashers that were significant to this film, but they also took lots of other references from other horror movies and threw it in here. And it's just a huge modge podge of thrown together ideas and creatures. And the fact that they all just work together, and each one is even represented in the cellar when the group goes down to the cellar, because the whole idea is that for this sacrifice to actually work, they have to choose. They have to make the choice. And in the basement, the cellar, it shows something that represents a creature that is in one of the cells or the cubes buried in the down the stairs. So Drew Goddard could literally go through and tell you what every item represents, because he handpicked everything, set everything up, and the whole crew kind of joked about the fact that you would think that he came from a cellar by the way that he had everything designed and ready to go for the film. All right, I could go on for hours and hours on end talking about this film, because, like I said, this film is so underrated. There's not a lot of people that talk about it. And to this day, it still surprises me that there are people who don't like this movie. Like, if they think it's too goofy or too out there. I mean, if you're one of those that you don't like it, let me know. What about it you don't like? Granted, I love the chaoticness of this one. And I love the fact that they take the horror movie tropes and they turn it into this type of atmosphere. So I could just, like I said, I can keep talking about this movie so much and just talk about how much I love and the fact that it's one of my favorite horror movies. But yeah, let me know, do you love this one? Do you dislike this one? And if you haven't seen it and now you're on here and getting spoilers for me, I tried warning you. I'm sorry. Hi, Callie. Yes, if you haven't been able to tell from my setup getting revamped and everything, that Callie's got her own personal spot on one of my bookshelves now. But she's now curling up on the heater since it's on. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me here on another Luxy Charms. This was kind of all over the place, but like I said, I kind of wanted to just talk about this one because of the fact that it's not talked about enough, and it's still a pretty recent film. So, wanted to bring up the conversation again, especially since I just hosted this film. And like I said, I got the idea to just talk about it anyways because of some of the funny random comments I was getting. But once again, thank you so much for joining me here for another Luxy Charms. And if you would care to follow me on any of my other social medias, there will be a link in the description down below. So, yes, if you want to join us for other FFB movie nights, that is on X or Blue Sky, Twitter, whatever the hell you want to call it. I don't even care anymore. And remember, I am the afterlife of the party, but I would love for you to join me in the afterlife of the party. And the easiest way to do that is to come and join me on my Patreon. And on the screen, you can see a shout out to all of my fellow Patreon members. And a special shout out to my Ultimate Luxes. So thank you so much to Chris Brunner and to Bishop. I appreciate you being Ultimate Luxes with me. And I also want to note that on one of my most recent vlogs that I will have in my Patreon is actually going to be an update to my last video that I did on here that was basically a Charcy Chats. I think I called it a Luxy Charms, but it's technically a Charcy Chats. Now I don't remember. This is how my brain works. But before the holidays, I did one and I have it titled, Your Mental Health is Just as Important as Your Physical Health. So I give a full update of what is going on and what we have found out from my last appointment I just had. So if you're interested in getting any updates on what's going on in my personal life and that, you are likely to get them on my Patreon because I'm not really putting too much of my personal life on here. Because even when I put up that last video that I had up here, the weird comment that I got that I blocked someone on, you're opening yourself up to the public. I get it. I really do get it. And there are some pretty revolting people out here. But anyway, and always remember to slay, subscribe, like, and always be yourself. And like I said, your mental health is just as important as your physical health. I swear my poor outro is getting longer and longer as we go. And also, like I said, let me know your thoughts on The Cabin in the Woods. I really didn't stick to my notes here very well, and I probably could have talked for 2 hours straight going into everything. And I love this movie. I love it so much. And it's one of those that it will always hold a special place in my heart, and I hope it does for you too. But until next time, my little Luxes, have a Luxy Charms kind of day. Boy!